again with how.
Oh, I so much hope so. Just realizing my hair looks really crappy. Oh well. No
I'm
worries.
very jealous of people with good backgrounds because my computer doesn't let me do backgrounds at all.
Oh.
My personal computer doesn't either. This is like my work laptop, so thank goodness for that.
Yeah, it's much more fun.
Yeah.
All right, just under a minute now. So good luck, everyone, and thank you so much. From the bottom of my heart and on behalf of North Shore Pride, thank you so much for being with us. It means a lot.
Good, everyone's back. We'll be going live in just about a minute. As soon as it hits 7, it'll go live.
Will you tell us though, Michelle?
Sure.
Okay, because otherwise I'll be blabbering and hear me.
I'll wait to close my camera if you want to tell people who the 2 interpreters are, and that way they can pin us, and then I'll close my camera if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay, everybody fix yourselves now, you know.
And most important, have fun and know that you're doing something wonderful for the community. So
Yeah.
that's all that matters. Oh, I notice my ear is getting really red. I don't know what that's about. Oh. Okay, I have 7.
Are we supposed to be raising our hand if we want to speak, as in like the control on Zoom?
You can just give a little wave.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Cool.
Just 2 more seconds.
1, 2.
All right, and we are going live now.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone, and welcome on behalf of North Shore Pride. My name is Hope Wabuchi, the honored president of North Shore Pride, a nonprofit organization with a mission of education and advocacy on behalf of the LGBTQ+ community here on the North Shore and beyond, because we are virtual now. I want to thank the topic of our forum this month is Speak Up, Speak Out. We'll talk about voting, protesting, and Allyship 101. I want to thank, most importantly, the Rainbow Times, who are the sponsors for this evening's event. I thank you so much. I want to thank Gabriel Boynton, who's an interpreter with Partners Organization, and also Kinsey, who's an interpreter who will be joining us this evening as well. We thank you so much. It's very important to North Shore Pride that everyone have access to these community forums. Before we start with the questions, I just want to be able to introduce our esteemed forum panel this evening. Just amazing panel of professionals. So we'll start with Ellyn Ruthstrom, who's the executive. Ellyn, give a little wave so people know. There you go. Is the executive director of SpeakOUT Boston. No, we did not get our title from her organization for tonight's forum. But SpeakOUT Boston is the oldest LGBTQ+ speakers bureau in the nation, founded in 1972. And Ellyn has been an out bisexual leader for over 20 years and was the president of Bisexual Resource Center for 10 years. And really importantly, co-organized the first White House roundtable on bisexual issues in 2013. We're very, very honored to have you with us, Ellyn. Thank you so much. Jay Cottle, a little wave there for Jay. There he is. He's an educator, arts administrator, musician, writer, and civic advocate. Jay is an educational specialist at Mass Vote and is the founder and executive director of Dunamis. And we're so honored to have him here. Jay actually is a 2019 National Arts Strategies Creative Community Fellow. Really, really impressive. Thank you so much, Jay, for being with us. Yves Singletary. Yves, if you can give a little bit, there you go. Serves as the Deputy Director for the Bureau of Community Health and Prevention at the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. There, he works to promote healthy life outcomes for residents. Yves has made a commitment to supporting the positive development of young people in our communities, and we are so honored to have you here this evening. Thank you, Yves. Next, Junior Pena. There he is. Junior serves as the Assistant Director for the Leadership, Engagement, Advocacy, and Diversity, otherwise known as the LEAD program, and the office at Salem State University. Junior develops training around bystander intervention, diversity equity trainings, identity-based dialogues, and student organization leadership development. We are amazingly honored to have you tonight at Salem State University, being my alma mater. I'm so excited to have you. Thank you so much, Junior, for being with us. Nicole Lashomb. Nicole, there she is a co-founder and co-executive director of Project Out, and also the editor, which is a program that provides services and education on behalf of transgender individuals, and also is the editor-in-chief of the Rainbow Times, New England's largest LGBTQ+ newspaper. Her work is primarily focused on underrepresented communities, and Nicole has addressed multiple audiences on issues relating to the intersectionality of our identities, and she also serves on the City of Salem No Place for Hate Committee. We're so honored to have you, Nicole. Thank you so much. Reverend Andre Bennett, Dr. Reverend Andre Bennett, I apologize, is the youth pastor at the Zion Church in Lynn and a graduate of UMass, Endicott College, and the Atlantic Coast Theological Seminary. Reverend Andre Bennett is an inspirational leader with ECHO, also bringing a powerful message of love and change to our communities. And we're very honored to have you this evening. Thank you so much. So with those introductions, I'd like to get started if we could. So we have questions that are brought forth, as in every one of our community forums, brought forth from our community. People want to know the answers. This, we think, was a very timely topic, voting, protesting, and allyship, given what's going on in the country right now. So we'd like to start with voting, and I think Jay Cottle, I think you might be the person that might kick this off. People want to know who can vote, who can't vote, what's the voting process. If you could help us out, and also the community, just to let you know, those listening, our forum members will also jump in from time to time and also provide their comments and expertise. So Jay, go ahead.
Thank you so much. This is a uniquely difficult and complicated voting year, so there's a lot of information I'm going to throw at everybody. So if I miss something, please just circle me back. First, in regards to who's eligible to vote, if you are 18 years old and a citizen of this country, you can vote in Massachusetts. In Massachusetts, the only other way you wouldn't be able to is if you are currently serving in prison for a federal crime. In Massachusetts, once you have finished your sentence, you can vote. That's not the same everywhere, but here it is. So convicted felons, once they've served their time, can vote. So that's the who can and cannot. In terms of how voting is going to work this year, there are three main ways. The first is vote by mail. And so the way that vote by mail works is, if you have not already, you're going to be receiving an application for a ballot in the mail. And that application just says, hey, I would like you to mail me my ballot for November. You send that back. The postmark is already paid for, so it doesn't cost you anything. And then they'll send you your ballot. You fill that out. You send that back, also paid for. So that's one part of the process. We started doing this earlier this year for the preliminary elections. And so some of you might have put on that original application, send me both my ballots. Send me the September one and the November one. So you actually might have cut down on how much mail you get, and you'll probably just get the ballot there. One thing that launched literally yesterday is you can actually request your ballot online. So you don't have to go through that back and forth paper process. And those links should be made available to you soon. If you are doing vote by mail, some folks have expressed concern around the safety of voting by mail in terms of whether those ballots will actually reach. There are a couple things that you can do with your mail-in ballot. One, you can mail it back, as I said, and that's free to you. Two, there are drop boxes available across the city where you can deposit those. You can also go to your city hall. And lastly, we have early voting this year, which I'll talk about in a second. You can actually take the ballot that you filled out, that you got in the mail, and drop it off during early voting. You cannot do that for the general, but you can do that during early voting. Which leads me to early voting. So this is an early voting year. And so for 2 weeks before the election, so from the 17th to the 30th, we're gonna have early voting times. Unfortunately, early voting depends on your city or town. So there's no one time, no one set whatever. But what I personally love about early voting is one, I don't like people. And so two, it means that it's a lot, the lines are less crowded, all of that. So it makes it a little bit safer. What's different about early voting than voting normally is not only can it happen on any day, sometimes the weekends, it's also not your regular polling location. So your polling location on the general election day is based on where you live. During early voting, you can vote anywhere there's a site open in the city. So if there's one closer to your job, closer to school, you can just go vote there. It does not have to be the one closer to your home. And the one closer to your home is probably not even open, right? So that's early voting. Lastly, you can vote on November 3rd, on election day. That is going to be at the polling location that is dependent on your address. So make sure that you're all set for that piece. And you cannot bring in your mail-in ballot there. What's different with vote by mail this year also is that you can have it postmarked. Your mail-in ballot can be postmarked by the 3rd and latest received on the 6th. We're not encouraging that, guys. Just as soon as you get it, send it back. Don't wait that long. Don't procrastinate. I'm the king of procrastination. Don't be like me. Be better. So that's kind of how it's going to work in terms of vote by mail, early voting, and actual voting on election day. If you're not registered to vote, the deadline to do that in order to be able to vote this November is the 24th of October. Okay, so you have until the 24th to register. You can register online, but, and this is coming up for a lot of people, if you register online, you need to have a valid state ID. That can either be a state ID or a driver's license. If you don't have that, you can fill it out a paper version and send that in, but you will need to show some form of identification at the polling place. So if you know that you are not registered and you do not have an ID, now is the time to figure out a time to go to the RMV, get that figured out so that you can be able to vote in this election. Let me make sure I'm not missing anything. I think that's it. The other thing that I'll lift up is that voting is important, as is the census, and next Wednesday is the deadline for the census. So Wednesday the 30th is the last day to complete your census. You can do that via mail, you can do it over the phone, you can do it online. I promise you it takes no longer than 5 minutes, unless you have a large household, maybe 10. It's very easy to fill out. And it has an impact of 10 years. That has to do with the money that we get, the representation we have in government. So it's highly, highly critical and important that you complete your census. So that really quickly is the how of it all, how it all works. And I want to talk a little bit about the why it's important to do. I know a lot of us come from marginalized communities and we see systems fail us constantly. But what I want to really make clear and drive home is not engaging with the systems does not protect us from their flaws. We still have to feel the ramifications of these systems that are working. And so to choose to not be involved with them only does us a disservice, because the people who typically oppress us are. So we have to be the ones that are engaging with those systems. We have to make sure we're voting, run for office, do all of these things. Voting is critical. And I know it can feel like sometimes it's not useful, but it is one step, one vital piece in a much larger game. And it's the one that we should be all doing. In our last election, 100 million people did not vote. That's and it's just it's a lot. It's a huge number, and that had ramifications. So please be a part of the process. We can always be doing more, but I want you to feel like if there's anything you do, at the very least, vote. That's me.
Jay, that's amazing. So can I ask a couple of questions? So, and please, panelists, jump in. What is the deterrent for people to vote, to not vote?
Got a whole workshop on it. There's a whole workshop I give on. It's a couple reasons, right? So one is there's apathy, and that voter apathy a lot of it has its plate, like it's rooted in reality, right? So there's a lot of disenfranchisement that goes around. We're actively trying to prohibit people from voting. And even now, all these years later, we're still having that fight. We're still watching as people get their polling places closed down. So they have to be in line for hours. There's new versions of poll taxes. People are being purged off voter rolls, right? So those things are happening. So not only is it the disenfranchisement, it's watching the disenfranchisement and being, well, then like, why do I want to be involved in this process? The other part of it is the Electoral College. A lot of people feel like their vote does not count. And we've seen, at least I'm a millennial, and in my generation, I think we've seen 2 or 3 times now where a president won with an Electoral College that didn't win with a popular vote. So that's something that's difficult as well. What I will say to folks about that is, while that might be true for a presidential election, that is the only time we vote electorally. Every other time in our voting process, it's done direct, right? And what we find, however, is that the rates of voting are much, much less when it comes to local elections and higher when it comes to presidentials. So we'll get 12 to 15% turnout in a mayoral race, but we'll have 75% in presidential. So if you truly believe that you want your voice to have a vote, you absolutely should be doing it on the local level. It's the part that gets to you the fastest. But again, that's the thing that we're working on. That's the thing that we're trying to push back against. And the last thing I did forget to say is there will also be 2 ballot questions this year. The first is related to the privacy of your car's data and who has access to it. And the second is about ranked choice voting. So there's a lot to prepare. Don't be overwhelmed. We have a lot of time. There's going to be a lot of resources that I know Mass Vote is sharing. I've seen a lot of people step up to making this as clear as possible. But then, to be honest, that's the last reason why people don't vote. It's overwhelming and confusing. There's a literacy aspect to being able to vote. Do they understand how that process works? There are language barriers there. The language, even in English, is not created to be easily understood. So there's a whole lot of reasons that people do not engage. And at least the work at Mass Vote is to simplify that process, to make votes more powerful, and to educate people on how it all works and how they can be involved.
That was my next follow-up question, was what are we doing to make sure that disenfranchised people or people who are English as a second language, what is Mass Vote doing, or what is our Commonwealth doing to assist those people?
There's a lot of language stretches we've been doing. We actually, unfortunately, had to sue the Secretary of State for a month ago because those vote by mail applications weren't released in all the languages they were supposed to. So we're making sure that, again, people have access to the ballot box in a way that's the most appropriate and easy for them. And we'll keep suing him till the cows come home if we have to. And that's just one part of the game. And the other part is making sure that we're putting up laws that make it easier. So we're big supporters of ranked choice voting. We've been trying to get election day registration passed. All of these things that make it easier. There should be no barriers to the ballot box. And one last thing that I'll say is when you open up the process, more people use it. We've never, in a year with vote by mail and early voting, and this has never happened like this before, we've already seen that we had a 20-year high turnout with these preliminary elections in a prelim, and that never happens. Again, like if people don't even vote locally, they never vote in prelims, especially in Massachusetts. And so again, if you make voting easier, if you simplify it and you open up to people, more people do it, and that is what we need.
Great, amazing. And everybody's concerned about the delay. You hear a lot about the delay. And should I, because my vote not even get there? Anything that we can do other than vote early, right?
If you get it, send it back immediately. You can also, again, drop it off at a Dropbox whenever you want, if you can find them. And there's a list of locations of those Dropbox available on the Secretary of State's website. You can always drop it off at your town hall. And then again, you can drop that off during early voting. You'll have those 2 weeks there.
Okay, great. Other panelists, questions for Jay or comments about the process? Or yes, Ellyn.
I had a question for Jay. Because you mentioned about the voter suppression, which we know is going to be intensive this election. And, a lot of attention has been on Florida's poll tax, as you mentioned. And I wondered if you had an update, because I saw a thing, Bloomberg says he was going to pay off, I don't know, the 30,000 people's debts or something. And then I saw something countering it, saying that somebody in the state was trying to make that invalid, as if that wasn't. Do you have any information in your voting, network in terms of how that's going?
Unfortunately, I don't. I have heard that too. So basically what's happening is there have been taxes that have been placed on people who are trying to vote, and those taxes are kind of prohibiting them from being able to exercise their vote. And I've seen a couple different fundraisers and initiatives around raising money, and I did see that Bloomberg said that he would just pay it all. But no, I haven't seen the details of how that's been shaking out. But I think what you're talking about raises another point where there's so much information and misinformation and disinformation that's gonna be coming out here that we have to be really critical about that this season too, because that's the other part of the voter suppression is the misinformation. That's really intentional. So all I would say is, as you're looking at these resources and links and articles, double check, triple check, verify with some other people, take that extra step before you let that in, because we've seen how that can have an impact on our elections. But yes, unfortunately, I don't have any details on that particular issue.
I think the only thing about it is that it makes it so obvious that the issue is they do not want people to vote. They're trying to invalidate the payment of it. It's crazy.
I also have a question, and forgive me, I'm, as long as I've been here, also kind of new to the voting process here. Let's say I realize, I don't know, 2 weeks before election, that I need to vote by mail. What's the cutoff point to request that mail-in ballot? And what about late deliveries in cases where, as we see, mailboxes are being removed and, all kinds of stuff that's happening?
That's a great question, and I'm going to get the answer to you right now about the vote by mail deadline. Actually, it's the 26th. Is that true? It's late, and that's why we're actually not pushing. It's like the last week of October, essentially, is the last week that folks can request a mail-in ballot. I'll get the exact date a little bit later. But because it's so late, we're not really encouraging that because of everything you just said with the mail thing. I think here in Massachusetts, we have not seen that level of vote tampering when it comes to the mailboxes being removed, etc. And I know I've been getting my packages on time, but I would say that the safest thing to do if you're going to cut it that close is you do still have early voting available to you. And again, we're in the midst of a pandemic, so I understand that people might not want to be going out there physically, but early voting, there's rarely any lines. It can be very quick, so people don't have to feel like they're being around other people. So I would say if you're going to cut it that close because life happens, and that does happen, get it, hand drop it in, go vote early. Those would be my tips and pointers.
Great. Junior, you work with, young adults, and so what is the consensus around campus in terms of voting? Do you have a sense about that?
It's actually funny you say that because we literally had a meeting today about kind of the voting process on campus. And I think one of the unique things that's going to be happening along with this pandemic taking place is that historically college campuses tend to be ballot locations and locations where students can directly vote on campus. But as a result of the pandemic and everything that's been taking on, specifically for Salem State University, we will not be a location for voting, right? And so as a result, one of the core pieces is really, I think our Center for Civic Engagement has done an amazing job of really, one, setting up opportunities for students to meet one-on-one with them and have a voting plan. So talking through what they should be thinking about, who's on the ballot, how to access that ballot, having a plan in place to be able to ensure that students understand what dates are kind of available, and actually to kind of jump off what was just previously discussed. The deadline for mail by vote is October 28th. So Jay, you were very close on that front. I know you put it in the chat, but we were just talking about that, so I had the date available. And also one of the things that I think the university is doing, and I suspect a lot of universities that no longer will have on-campus voting available will do, is to provide shuttle services. And so I suspect that, one, it seems like a lot of students have energy around this particular election. And I say that on both sides. Being as someone that not only works with student organizations, but works with a lot of students across the board. I believe that a lot of our young people are energized around this particular election year, feel that it's important to engage. And I think that, just similar to like what Jay mentioned in terms of the primary being such a high turnout, I think this election year is going to be an even bigger turnout in terms of the presidential election. And I think one of the biggest things that we're doing at Salem State University is trying to educate students to understand that yes, the presidential election is important. You're going to know those candidates, you're going to know those and see those debates, but you're also going to have to know about those questions that are on the ballot, those additional folks that are going to be represented, so you can be able to make informed decisions about your representatives across the board. And I think that that's really important as well.
Great. Great.
If I can jump in really quickly on that, I know one thing that was helpful to me this year with vote by mail is we don't always know who's on our ballot when we get there, right? And then we're just like, oh, this name sounds cool. But what was really great was I could literally Google people at my table. And so I had my ballot early. I literally Googled people, and then I was like, okay, I can make a better decision. So even if you feel like you do want to vote in person, that's another option that's available to you. Get your ballot, see who's there, do some research, and you'll be a lot better prepared than we normally are.
That's a great suggestion, Jay. I have been guilty of, oh, yeah, okay. And Yves, do you have any comments or thoughts about this from the Congress perspective or your own?
Yeah, I guess for one clarifying question, if someone decides that, they decide that they want to vote early, and then they send in their ballot and they change their mind on a candidate for whatever reason, am I allowed to go back and vote on the day of?
That is a fantastic question. No, you can receive, the short answer is no. Once you send that ballot in, you have voted. So once that's received, that is it. You can't vote twice in an election. However, if you do request a ballot, but you never fill it out, you can still decide later, actually, I want to vote early. You can even fill it out if you want to, but as soon as it's sent, that's when you can't vote twice. So, yes.
Oh, okay, good to know. Nicole, thank you. We're having a little bit of connection problem, but
yes, third time's the charm, they say. So hopefully I won't disappear again.
I'm getting a message too, so I'm holding on. This is a popular Zoom time for everyone.
Right, sure.
Nicole, do you have either from the Rainbow, their perspective, what they're publishing in terms of voting and the process of voting, or just voting in this year?
Yeah, so in the moment, we're publishing a lot of stuff relating to the election, and actually our October edition is our election edition. And so there's all sorts of information on voting, on the candidates, on what's happening, throughout New England, especially with all of the protesting and the struggles that we're seeing with police brutality and all of that, which obviously all ties into voting and reforming systems of oppression as well. And so that's coming across.
Okay, great. I know you're slowing down a little bit, so if you can get in a better location, thank you so much for that. Okay, so Jay Cottle, thanks so much and Andre, did you have your hand up? I'm sorry.
I was just going to suggest to Nicole, because she is slowing down, for better bandwidth, maybe turn off your camera for maybe about 3 minutes or so, and allow the bandwidth to speed up or build up back, and then try turning it back on.
Yeah, let me try that. Thanks a lot, Andre.
Well, I actually wanted to mention one thing too, because I think this is extraordinary, and Massachusetts has this. I don't know how many states do, maybe Jay, where you can, after you've early voted or sent in your ballot, you can check online that they got it. I mean, I think right now with people very doubtful about the post office, that makes you feel really good. If you put it in the mail and then you go online and you go, oh, good, they got it. It's a fabulous system.
Yeah, as part of the law that got us to expand early voting, there was a portal that was built on the Secretary of State's website that lets you track your ballot. I believe I put it in the chat, one of those links. I used it last time because I'm gonna be honest now, I did not mail in my ballot until like 3 days ahead of the primary. So do as I say, not as I do. But just to double check, I had to use that, and it literally just told me it was received, and I could take that sigh of relief off. So thank you, Ellyn, for bringing that up.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions about voting? There's some great links that Jay Cottle put up in the chat that people can take advantage of, as well as we'll make sure that we put those links on our North Shore Pride social media platforms as well. So Jay, thank you so much. And to all of you, thank you for your comments and your questions. Shall we move on to Protesting 101? Sound good? Again, a very timely topic. And so I would like to start with Reverend Dr. Andre Bennett, if I could, to talk about sort of protesting 101. Who can protest? What are the types of protests? Those sorts of questions, if you wouldn't mind. And then we're going to jump around to Junior and to Yves and certainly to Ellyn.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you very much. Good evening to everyone, and thank you for having me, Hope and North Shore Pride. Protesting is very, very important to me personally. And it is a part of our constitutional right and responsibility to do so. Now, as I sat here, I Googled, because I never really looked for the official definition for protest. And as I sat here, I Googled the definition, and I'll read. Protest, also called demonstration, remonstration, or remonstrance, is a public expression of objection, typically a political or disapproval, disapproval or dissent towards an idea or action, typically a political one. It takes many different forms from individual statements to mass demonstrations. And why it is absolutely important for us to protest, one, is to state our position and let our voices be known and be heard. Now, I know that when we hear the term protest or we hear of an action, automatically some of us go toward violence and riots, and that's where our minds go to. Understand that a protest is vastly different. The objective of a protest, the ideas and the actions behind a protest, they're vastly different from those of riots. Riots, like everything else, have its place. It's not encouraged, but it does have its place. Protest, however, is something that is a healthy part of the political and daily conversation of our daily lives. Reason being, we will never all totally and completely agree on anything in terms of policies, in terms of ideas, in terms of laws. We will never agree. How we state our disagreement, how we state our disapproval is by protesting. The word in of itself is not a bad word. People hear protest and, oh my God. And it could look something as simple as you coming to my office and say, I do not agree with that, and you state your reasons. That's a form of protest. Or one of the most effective form is organizing a group of people to say, we're gonna stand up, we're gonna speak up, we're gonna speak out. I didn't understand the power of protest. I didn't know that was my voice or my power until, well, it might sound early for some, but for me, until I was 9 years old, or as early as 9 years old. And that started when I lived in Jamaica. I grew up in Jamaica. And, you know, Jamaica has this education system where it's modeled after the Westminster education system. So, you know, the kids do what they do and they push them through school. If you demonstrate the ability to, you know, to go through, you're able to skip classes and skip grades, and you go through. And by the time I was 9 years old, I was in high school competing with high school students because, you know, they administered exams and I did well. The problem, however, is that I was not socially developed nor ready to be in high school. And I found myself in more dumpster bins than I would have wanted to. That caused me daily. The guidance counselor became my best friend the first 3 years of high school. That caused me daily to be in the guidance counselor's office. And when I was in and I didn't know this until the guidance counselor mentioned it to me. When I'm in there, I'm not complaining about the fact that I was beat up or I was tossed in the bin or I didn't have any friends. I was complaining about the fact that I'm 9 years old. Why am I in high school with kids that are 14 and 15 years old competing? Why am I here? And I remember my guidance counselor, her name was Mrs. Wallace. She said to me, why don't you write a letter to the secretary, we call them minister, the Minister of Education, expressing your views and your disapproval of the education system. And from there, we started working together. Me and her started working together on the letter, and I would write and she would edit and she would send me back and I would put more stuff in it. Long and short of it is, by the time I got to the 9th grade, high school in Jamaica starts at the 7th grade. So by the time I got to the 9th grade, the letter was ready to be sent. The letter was sent and we were ready to have a conversation. A national conversation had started about the educational process. That was when I realized, oh, I have a voice. My voice is powerful. I can speak up and I can speak out and it can stop the world. People will listen. Whether I get the result that I'm looking for is a different conversation, but people will listen. And that's when I realized how absolutely important it is to not just, be uncomfortable with something, but to speak up, to state your disapproval. What we see happening nationally, it's not it didn't start yesterday. It didn't start because, someone a month ago or 2 years ago or 3 years ago decided that, I don't like how this community of people are treated or that group of individuals are treated. What we see happening nationally is people have understood over time, over many, many years and centuries, how absolutely critical it is and important it is to organize and to stand together, to speak up and to speak out. Protest is absolutely essential. If we're going to have checks and balances in our system, there is a sacred place and a sacredness where protesting is concerned. If we're gonna advance in any way, shape, or form, people will have to continue speaking up and speaking out. If we think for a minute that we have gotten to the best we can get, we're deceiving ourselves. But the only way we're gonna be able to get better or to get further is by us all collectively protesting. Protest and state your piece, state your position, be firm, stand up, speak out, organize. There's a difference between activism and organizing. And I'm viewed as an activist. I aim to be an organizer because what an activist does is see an issue, take that issue on and run with it. What an organizer does is collectively build power between a group of people or a community of people that are able to effectively effect change, positive change, fundamental changes. And so whilst it's good to be an activist, they have a little saying, if you want to go far, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. And so, whilst it's good to be an activist because you go fast, there are times personally, as many of you might know or might have heard, I'm here, I'm leading actions, I'm doing stuff. And there are times I'm sitting in meetings and the conversations are not moving at the pace that I would want them to go. And I'm thinking to myself, I could do this by myself. But I also understand that if I am going to show up with power, if I'm going to show up in power, if I'm going to be respected and taken, viewed as someone who is powerful, I can't do it by myself. I have to have a group of people standing with me who share a common belief, a common thought, and we're together working toward a greater good. So protest is absolutely, absolutely important. Join something, and don't just join something because it sounds good or your friends are a part of it or somebody tells you that you need to be a part of it. We find ourselves at this place in our nation right now and in the world actually right now where people want to do something because there's so much injustice that's being meted out on the black, the indigenous, the people of color, the brown community, on the LGBTQ plus community, on minorities of all sorts. There's so many injustices that are meted out and people just want to do something. But I say, whilst that is great that you want to do something, you must have a vision and you must have an idea as to what you want to do, because oftentimes just trying to be an ally to a movement is more detrimental and damaging than being the right ally to the right movement. Oftentimes just trying to stand up because everybody else is stand up and I want to be counted in the number, is actually, it becomes a hamper on the movement if you're not in the right movement, because there are going to be ideological differences in every movement. There are going to be policy issues. No, you know, I am here and I'm fighting for equal justice for the BIPOC community and the LGBTQ plus community. I am one of those people who believe in defunding the police, but I know I have ideological difference with some people who believe in dismantling the police. I am not calling for dismantling, I'm calling for a defunding of the police, and those are two different things. So what you find happening, if someone just decide, okay, I love the words that he's saying, I love what he stands for, I'm gonna jump in, and then you're in and you realize, oh, we have two different stands on where what the police should be. What you find happening, the movement gets slowed down, because now we have to figure a way internally to get to a compromise, and that could take away from doing and pushing the action that we wanted, that we're trying to push forward. So again, I say, one, it's absolutely important. Two, it's a constitutional right. Who can do it? Three, every human being has the right and the responsibility to protest. We all, once you have breath and you're able to move, you can protest. You can find ways, you can find actions, you can find organizations, you can find groups that their vision, their mission align with your beliefs, and you can speak up. Or my very favorite is, you can start your own movement. You can start your own movement, whatever it is. If you care about the environment and there's no group, no individual, no organization that you align with, start your own movement, because your voice is absolutely important. It is absolutely powerful. And the last thing I want to say before I shut up is, you know, when it comes on to protests and demonstration, if you're in any of those towns that you feel like you're told that you need permission or permit from the police department to protest, to demonstrate, I want to say to you, it is false. It is not true. Constitutionally, you have the right to protest whenever you choose to do so, peacefully, of course. And peace looks different for every person, but if you're putting yourself or others in the way of imminent danger, then you might want to reevaluate your actions. But you certainly have the right, and you do not need a permit or permission from your city council or your local police department. You do not need permit or permission from anyone to stage a protest. Be clear about what your action is. Be clear about what your outcomes are. Be clear about the asks. Make sure you have asks. Don't just join and wave your placards and your banners and your signs because you're able to do so. Make sure you have asks. And it's always very important to have one, two, three main asks on the topic or the subject is that you are protesting about. Make sure your asks are concise, they are clear, and they're critical to the furtherance and the development of whatever it is that the action is about. And third and finally, make sure you have the physical strength. My grandmother always says, my grandmother who is my shiro, she always says, if you don't have what it takes to get through the first round of the fight, do not get in the ring, because there are 12 rounds. So if you can't get through the first round, you're not going to make it through the 12th. So make sure you have the physical strength to carry the work on. But it's absolutely important. Everyone should, can, and must protest in order to make sure your voices are heard.
Dr. Andre Bennett, thank you so much. It's amazing, wonderful. I have a few questions, but I'm going to pass it on to Junior Pena, and then to Ellyn, please, and then to Yves and to Nicole, who will get back on. Go ahead, Junior.
So do you want me to jump in with the protests or the allyship conversation a little bit?
I just want your comments on testing, because you know, I know that you work with diverse communities at the university, and a lot is happening at Salem.
Yeah. So there was actually a couple things that really stuck out to me. I mean, one, it's unfortunate I have to follow the Reverend Doctor. He really put it down right now. But I do think that when it comes to protesting, and particularly the conversation that we have about movements. And I'll be honest, I'm speaking from my perspective, right? So I'll make this very clear. I don't like to mince words personally. But for me personally, when I think about protests, putting a qualifier around a protest being peaceful isn't sufficient enough for me, right? And I found that as a result of what's been taking place across the country, that there's been communities and groups of people that feel more comfortable aligning themselves with actions that suggest that I'm part of a peaceful protest, right? Or I'm not one of those people that are out there rioting or looting, right? And I think that this contention I bring up is because on college campuses, it shows up, right? And so when people, and particularly our young people, are interested in engaging with something, they tend to align with a lot of the optics or how it looks to them, right? And so oftentimes we find the divide between students that feel really radicalized and are trying to disrupt, dismantle, in whatever way possible. And that also means that property, that objects, that things are not going to be something that physically gets in their way, right? Which is almost poetic if you think about it, right? But then there are students that also feel that that's too much, right? That you're not acknowledging that business owner, or you're not acknowledging that particular property and what it was necessary to be able to acquire, right? And so I think it ties to what Dr. Bennett brought up in terms of this ideological difference that tends to enter in, right? And I'll talk a little bit further about this when it comes to the allyship conversation, but I think not understanding why it's important that both of those happen at the same time, and that those spaces happen and that they can be able to build on it, but then more importantly, lead to actual tangible action steps, is what ends up creating a lot of issues for us when we think about educators. Because then you get placed in situations and in conversations where if you're not radical enough, then you're no good to us, right? And if you're only interested in doing this, then you're no good to us. And my challenge to folks always is like, well, maybe they are good to you and maybe they are good to the cause, but in different ways. And maybe they're providing an answer that might be able to connect somebody else to this, might be able to connect somebody else to an issue, right? And I think this ideological difference is like at the core of what issues arise with young people that I work with anyways, where they're like, well, this person such and such, they just love to post on things, right? Well, maybe that person isn't necessarily interested in being at the front lines. There might be health conditions that are preventing them from feeling willing to engage in a large mass protest, right? And maybe they're educating themselves silently. Maybe they're educating themselves to inform their perspective before speaking out and feeling bad about what they say, right? And so there's a lot of things that we could be able to arrive at, but my challenge always to the young folks that I work with is like, understand that there's value in both of those ideological differences. There's values in places that they go, and your job as the next generation is to hold them accountable to continually sustainably do the work, right? Because one of the things that Dr. Bennett really emphasized was the fact that like, yo, if you can't do round one, then how are you sustainably going to do the other rounds, right? Like if you're burning yourself out because of everything that's taking place, then how are you going to be useful to yourself, to your own well-being, to your communities, and to the people around you? And so those were just some of the things that stuck out to me.
Great point. Thank you so much. Ellyn, speak up, speak out.
Yeah, well, actually, just when you had mentioned that idea of physically being part of protest, that for me now as an elder, that I see my body differently when I protest, because I am not as strong as I was. So I don't feel as able to put myself into a protest like I did when I was at military bases, and when I was outside abortion clinics, and when I was, when I was putting my body out there and feeling fine about it, knowing I was strong enough and everything. And now I don't feel that safe and that secure in the strength of my body. And so it feels different. It feels different, but we all have a place. We all have a place within the protest, and we need to, when we're doing a physical protest. The thing I was going to say was, so for Speak Out, our mission, we're a community of speakers working to create a world free of homo, bi, transphobia, and other prejudice by telling the truths of our lives. And so we feel the power of storytelling to open minds, change attitudes about things. And so it's not the same as, protesting on the streets, but it's a way of using our personal lives to to change, to promote positive social change. And I think that that's a really good way to remember, especially when we started in 1972, it was a big thing, like for any LGBTQ person sometimes to be invited into spaces to talk about their lives. And for the first few decades, we had some very hostile environments that we would go into, and our motto of ask us anything opened up the door to a lot of difficult questions and difficult conversations that we would go through. Luckily, because of the social change that we've seen in the last 50 years, you know, that we have many fewer hostile encounters with people. But we also really like opportunities where we can still do that. We were invited to Gordon College just a couple years ago, and Gordon College is a very evangelical Christian space, a college up on the North Shore. But there were queer students on their campus who wanted us there. And so in negotiating with their administration, we were allowed to come and speak, but we also had to have a panel, 2 panelists of people speaking from the perspective of gosh, I always try and blank out the therapy that they do to conversion therapy. So they had the people talking about that, and then they had us. And it was a really powerful place that night, that the queer students felt really validated. And I'm sure that some of the Christian students felt validated in hearing from the other perspective, but we also had some discussions across that. And I think that was really powerful to have that. And I really think that is a part of protest as well, to be able to come together and have those conversations that will hopefully move things along for individuals as well as potentially institutions.
Right, wonderful. Well, thank you for your work, Ellyn. Yes, Andre, and then I want to go to Yves.
Sure, if I may, I'm sorry. I just wanted to address something that Ellyn said, which I think is so important about, you know, just as you mature more in life, you are more cognizant of your physical abilities. And there's this activist that I absolutely love to quote, Ella Baker. And one of the things that she said in one of her speeches is that the older I get, the better I know that the secret of my going on is when the reins are in the hands of the young who dare to run against the storm. Not needing to clutch for power, not needing the light to shine on me, I get to be one in a number as a stance against tyranny. And I am getting to that place where I'm realizing that you are not 25 anymore. As a matter of fact, you have children that are 25 now. So, you know, and a prime example of that is one of the actions that I did some time ago. I was like, okay, we're gonna kneel for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And I got down, and I'm telling you, when I say it was a struggle to get back up, it was a struggle to get back up after those 8 minutes. And I walked with a limp for about a week and a half. And I'm like, yep, my body tells me that there are some things I am not capable of doing anymore. And that's real, because I hear that everywhere I go on the North Shore, there are people who want to be a part of the movement, but they don't know that they're physically able because of their advanced in age, or they might have had a few, you know, procedures done, medical procedures done that prevent them. Using your physical body is not, and you said it perfectly, Ellyn, that is not the only way to support or to be a part of the movement or to protest. I have within my household individuals that you probably will never see out there the way you would see me. But every social media post or thing that I need to make, every signs, every time I come home with an idea, every time someone calls me and bounce something off, I have people. And as Dr. Martin Luther King says, you see my face, but you don't see who's behind me. And so it is very, very important for us to know that because we're not physically able to do some of the things, and our bodies are not able to withstand some of the rigors that protesting or being out there demonstrating require, doesn't mean that we can't be a part of the action.
Thank you. Thank you. That's a great point. Yves, I wondered, you have a commitment to supporting the development of young people in our community, and I just wonder your comments on this topic on protesting.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that, and I think that across the speakers this was said, but if we pull out, zoom out a little bit from the protest and think about like the issue and the movement, recognizing that everyone has a role in the movement, right? And then thinking about how do we create space for everyone in the movement. And I think right now we're in a time where we think about cancel culture, and if you don't fit in perfectly, we're saying like there's no room for you. And so as we think about how difficult the issues are that we are facing and how ingrained they are into our systems and our culture, we have to figure out a way to create space for folks and meet people where they're at and welcome them into the movement, right? And knowing that people are gonna make mistakes along the way, right? They're gonna get it wrong. And what does that look like for us to create movements for issues that allow everyone to be a part of it and get us through this process, knowing that it is going to take collective action.
Right, right. What about, could I ask the panel, one of the questions was, you know, where do I protest? How do I find pertinent information about if I was interested in protest a group as opposed, you know, by myself standing on a corner? And then the other follow-up question that the community wanted to know about was, are there destructive motivators, we'll call them, showing up protest a movement? So I just want to pose those two questions. Well, how do I find out about protests if I want to join a protest? And then why are there destructive motivators, and how do I stay safe in those situations? Anyone? Jump in.
Sure. Where do I find actions or protests? That's a very, you know, it's a frequently asked question, and this is my response to that. We are living in one of the greatest times in history where social media is the order of the day. And not only that, what we have seen in this country over the last 5 years, every city, every town is making a rush to try to get on the right side of history, one would hope. And so there are a number of racial justice committees and racial justice departments and racial justice this and social justices within communities, within cities and towns. Why do I say that? There's almost always a social media website or page that is dedicated or committed to social justice actions, movements, and meetings within a particular town. If that doesn't work, if you can't find that, you can always call your local town hall or city office and ask questions about, you know, what is happening in terms of racial justice. If that doesn't work, I promise you, if you are on social media, you have a friend who knows a friend who knows another friend who has a friend who's involved in something. And so there is, information is there. You know, again, the greatest and most detrimental thing that ever happened to this generation is a search engine. If you type the word in your Google search, information is going to come up. So that's the first. I hope that is helpful. Here's what I say about destructive motivators and why are they there. And like I said in my opening, each of us have the right to protest. Each of us have the constitutional right to speak up and speak out, and that includes those that are not necessarily supporting us or believe in what we believe in. So I can't tell you how many events I've been at where I'm either the main speaker or one of the core organizers, and literally 10 feet away from me, someone's hurling negative, nasty words or thoughts at me. And you're right, there's a sense of anxiety in that moment because I don't know what this person is going to do. I don't have the answers to how we stay safe from things like that. But I will say this, and I say this everywhere I go. I call upon those of us who are able, because we are protected by either privilege or position, we are able to stand between safety and danger. We can be that bridge in between. So I oftentimes, when I'm at these actions or these events, I oftentimes look for people that I trust, and primarily they're white people that I trust, and I'll say to them, I need you to use your body and to be a protective shield between me and whoever this person or that group is. Because the harsh reality is, you know, I'm 6'2", I have dreadlocks, I'm a Black man. You know, I'm at danger just for waking up in the mornings. You know what I mean? Which is not necessarily the case for my white counterparts. I've had situations where I'm protesting at City Hall where the police station is, and I'm protesting the police. I'm calling them out for what they're doing, but I've had to call on them to come and stand between me and whoever that person is. I don't know that there's any clear-cut response to how do we protect ourselves from these dangerous or destructive motivators. However, I say to us at all times not to allow them to prevent us from speaking up, because that is the time when they win. Unfortunately, danger or violence is it's harsh and it's hard and it's potentially deadly. But even in the face of danger and violence, we have not lost until we stop speaking. And so the moment we run away from or we cower down to the dangerous motivators, that's when they win. So I say, you know, find your safety net. Find who the marshals and the safety guides and the liaisons are in whatever event you're doing or whenever you're organizing stuff. Make sure you identify safety marshals, make sure you identify police liaisons, make sure you identify these people who their task is to ensure that there's some amount of safety that surrounds your whatever you're doing.
Thank you.
That helps.
Thank you. You know, I think this is a topic that we could talk about all night, you know, by itself. And so I very much appreciate, I just want to mention that Nicole Lashomb lost connection and is unable to get it back. She's had some computer issues. So she apologizes and we thank her profusely for making those attempts. So if I could, just because of time, if I could move on to allyship. And I wonder if Yves, if you might want to start the discussion about allyship, and then I'd like to go to Junior Pena to talk about allyship. Because Yves, I know that your whole organization for the Commonwealth, it really is about allyship and development. So maybe your comments about the importance of allyship, and then we'll go over to Junior, if I could, and then to Ellyn.
Yeah, definitely. And so I think even before starting at allyship, it's thinking about like, why do we need allies to begin with, right? And when we think about that, unfortunately, we live in a society where every day people's dignity is being assaulted. And it's because of that, we really need people to step up and step in to think about how do we disrupt that violence that is taking place. And so, you know, when I think about what does it mean to be an ally, I'd like to take that a step further and think about what does solidarity mean? And I think oftentimes when we think about allyship in itself, it can feel like, you know, I'm wearing this badge of allyship, right? And you know, when we think about solidarity, it really means to really be with people and take action and really think about, you know, how you're intentionally taking action and using your privilege to really, you know, interrupt power. And oftentimes, you know, in order to be able to do that, you have to recognize that, you know, there's something just about who you are, right? That you have some unearned privilege just because of that. And there are people who are not liked just because of who they are. And so there are some people when you know, have the privilege to think about, you know, the freedom to choose where you're going to live, and not have to think about the fact that my existence in this neighborhood is perceived as bringing down the property value, or thinking about I'm going to go use the restroom, and when I walk into the restroom, someone's not going to you know, ask me a question about why I'm here, or potentially face violence for stepping into the restroom, or I'm going to go in to a building to access services, and I have to think about, can I actually physically enter this building, and actually when I go and get the services, can I get the services in the language that I actually need to in order to fully access the services, right? And so it's because of all these barriers that exist in our society, we need you know, allyship to take place. And when we think about, you know, that the allyship and who is an ally and how does someone become an ally, we have to think about who is most impacted by issues, right? And how do we make sure that if you are ready to step up and step in this way, how are you centering the voices of the people who are most affected, and how are you taking their lead to really utilize your privilege to take action? And so when I think about, you know, this movement as a whole, and everyone recognizing that there are different pieces to the movement, whether it be, you know, people who are elected officials, people who work in, you know, government in a structured standpoint, people who are out in the community mobilizing, all of us playing a role in that movement. And it's really important for us to recognize that, you know, our identities aren't siloed, and really recognizing what the intersections are. And so if we are gonna, you know, really take action, we have to make sure that, you know, in our development, in our growth, how do we develop a racial lens to the work that we're doing as an ally, and a class lens to what our work as allies? And again, like, really, how are we creating that space for everyone to, you know, be involved, and recognizing that as a community, we're all interconnected, right? And my humanity is tied into your humanity. And I think when we as a collective recognize that, we are going to have the ability to really shape the systems that we all deserve to live in.
That's amazing. I'm curious in terms of the Commonwealth. Do you feel like the Commonwealth has made a good movement in terms of developing programs for allyship across, I'd say, the last decade or so?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always improvement, opportunities to improve, right? So if we say right now, you know, in the, you know, I manage the Division of Violence and Injury Prevention, and we have, you know, a safe spaces program. We fund, you know, 8 organizations across the state to provide resources for young people who identify as LGBTQ. And, you know, we say 8 organizations, like, yes, we have 8 organizations, but I'm sure there are so many young people who are in need, who need more. So no, we're never doing enough, right? And then as we think about the intersections, it's not just enough that we have specialized organizations who are serving the LGBTQ community. When we think about that intersectional lens, we have to really think about how we're designing from the margins, right? So that we can make the most effective systems that work for everyone. And oftentimes when, you know, we are designing systems, how do we create more opportunities to get people's voices and inputs at the beginning of the process, right? And so I think that, you know, within my team, there are really amazing and talented people who are thinking about this. Across state government, we have really amazing people who are thinking about this. And I think, again, there's always the opportunity to do more. And we live in Massachusetts, where we have made some really amazing strides, right? So I think it's a both end.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your work. And just to take that from the state perspective over to the community perspective, Junior Pena, if you could talk a little bit about allyship and the work that you're doing.
Yo, Hope, if you don't mind, do you mind if I offer the opportunity to Ellyn to, like, give us info from what she's been doing for a lot longer than me?
Oh, absolutely. I was going to go to Ellyn next. Ellyn, go right ahead.
Yeah.
Thank you, Junior. Thank you.
Oh, cool. Well, I mean, because we do a lot of discussion of allyship, because we're going into a lot of spaces that are sometimes we're brought into a space by an ally of the community and not necessarily an LGBTQ person. And so they are they're trying to educate themselves and change their environments. And so we're working with allies in that way. The thing that I think about allyship is, allyship is not just a belief. It is action. You need to act to be an ally. You have to show up. You've got to do the work. You have to educate yourself. So I believe, like, when those people invite us in, that's a part of it. That's a part of the education system, and of learning about what are queer lives about. You need to start educating before you, and continue educating yourself. What I think is good is, like, SpeakOUT people, we put ourselves out there to help the education process. We're volunteering to do that. I think sometimes it's hard for any group that when you're constantly asked to educate other people, and that gets tiresome, but we are there for that reason. We want to be encouraging those discussions in that context. And I think also within any movement, if we want any movement to be successful, you have to have allies. You have to have people working together. That's what's amazing. And you have to look at yourself, okay, I need an ally as a queer person, but how can I be an ally to other communities? Who can I be the ally for? Who do I need to educate myself more about so that I can work better with that community? So I think it's a constant kind of process where you're looking back and forth to see what kind of support you need. How can I be a support for another community? And that's where you can move yourself, move everyone together forward.
I think that's a great point in terms of the evolution of allyship, right? Or the revolution of allyship. Either one. Thank you all so much. Junior, do you want to speak? And then Jay, I'd love to hear from you as well.
Yeah, so I kind of want to tie some of the things that were mentioned by Yves and also Ellyn, and so I'll kind of go through some of the questions and be able to contextualize some of this, right? Because oftentimes I'm sure our viewers and our participants and people that are interested in this particular topic are asking themselves and are thinking about this, right? And so in working with young people, I find that there are common misconceptions people have about allyship, right? One of those is something that Ellyn specifically mentioned, and they see it as a status, right? So it's stagnant, it stays there, it's a badge, and it's something that you keep on your chest. I'm an ally, I'm a good one, right? I'm a good one of whatever that identity group is that I'm trying to ally myself with, right? The counterpoint to that is that it's an active unlearning, right? An education process that you have to be able to ensure that you're also educating yourself, not for the sake of that group, right? But to engage accordingly and appropriately and with consideration centered at the focal point, right? And I think that that changes your perspective when you understand that that you aren't the know-it-all. You aren't the one that is bringing all this power and bestowing it upon this group of people that somehow have maintained while these systems have been set up to ensure that they don't succeed, right? So like, let's take away that status mark and understand that it requires energy, it requires education and a consistency to it, right? So sustainability in a lot of ways, tying back to what Dr. Bennett meant about protesting. I think along with that, another misconception, Junior, I don't want to mess up. Cancel culture is real. Don't you see people on Twitter getting canceled? They're not even buying their things anymore, right? And what people equate cancel culture to right now is really tone. If someone responds to you about something you said in a tone that you didn't appreciate, you feel some kind of way about it and you feel that they canceled you, right? No, what you're doing is tone policing, right? Because you feel as a person with particular privilege and power and a custom privilege and power that they should be speaking to you with a particular kind of tone, right? Come correct. Nobody owes you a response in a particular kind of way. On some real note, if you're trying to be an ally, understand that. Check it at the door because nobody cares, right? If people are talking about issues that are talking about violence, about death, right? They're not considering your temporary discomfort. And so something that I tried to contextualize for our students, right, is that your temporary discomfort in this particular space is something that someone is feeling every single day, right? That they can't choose to escape, that they can't choose to leave. And so you telling me that your temporary discomfort and uncomfortable suggests to me that you're not acknowledging what you're bringing to the space and what other people aren't capable of bringing to the space, right? So when we talk about allyship, understand that your temporary discomfort does not rationalize away the fact that people experience this every single day and don't have a choice. They can't hang it up, right? When you've done that, then it starts to developing the actual work, right? And it starts with you. And people are like, Junior, be like Dora the Explorer. Give me a map. I need a map to know what to do, what steps I need to do so I can get to my outcome and to my location, right? Like I need some steps, right? So I'll give you some steps, but they aren't going to be clear. The first thing is understand who you are and understand yourself, who you are deeply. So I think a lot of people can say, I'm a Black person, right? Or I'm a Hispanic Latino person, or I'm Dominican, or I'm bisexual, right? No, I want you to go deep down to the depths of those questions that you have for yourself in terms of things that you avoid. Because when you're entering spaces with people that are experiencing marginalization and oppression, those are the spaces that they're entering in. And if you want to honor that, then you have to bring it as well, right? So understand yourself before you enter spaces. And that way, stop asking about like, oh, is this the appropriate way to do this? And right? Read, Google your friend. The first thing I tell people, I get a lot of people that message me. They're like, Junior, what are your thoughts on this? I literally send a screenshot to the Google search bar, go Google some terms, go Google some words, bring something to this conversation, and then we can enter in together, right? Because then we're on an even playing field. We're talking as equals, right? Not me talking down to you and you not talking down to me. And I think that that's important when we think about allyship, right? Educate yourself, inform yourself, and continue doing so. And then I think about this particularly for, I'll admit it, right? I enter in spaces where students don't have at times the words to be able to engage in appropriate professional manners. And I don't really care for that, right? Like I want you to bring whatever it is that you're feeling that day, place, and space, right? But I think as a result, we lose sight of the importance of allies. And so I say all of this to say that everyone should be looking to not only organize and engage with allies, but become an ally. Because you undoubtedly are comprised of power, privilege, and oppression, right? You aren't just all oppression. If you're engaging with us, you have access to internet, right? If you're viewing this right now, you have access to a community. You have access to an organization that's doing advocacy work. Those are privileges that you undoubtedly have, right? So that means you also have opportunities to ally yourself with other communities that don't have that same privilege. Get that at the door. Don't come with me and say that we don't need allies, we do. I think what ends up happening is that we lose sight of the fact, and for me, the core piece of my education is tied to social justice education. Social justice education is acknowledging that everyone loses something as a result of systems of oppressions, even people with dominant identities, even if not to the same extent as people with marginalized identities, right? Acknowledging that positionality and power is real, but everyone loses something as a result of this, right? And so we have to understand that and center that and understand that, like, no, you don't have to tone police, but maybe don't just cut them out and maybe say, hey, read a book. This is a book that I have that I've already read that was really helpful for me. Check that out. Or if you have the time and capacity and it's someone that you feel could actually be willing to engage with this, then actually spend some time conversing with them, learning more about their backstory, and you might be more inclined to understand where they're coming from and where they're entering it. So the last piece for me, right, is tied to this, and actually Yves mentioned a really good job on this front, right? Ultimately, when I think about allyship and why everybody should be an ally in some capacity and in some form and continually trying to do that, is that it's tied to reconnecting our humanity. A lot of our literature, a lot of what we read, a lot of what we see is a lack of humanity. And it's a lack of an ability to empathize with that humanity. It's a lack of an ability to even want to reason. So rather than trying to come to terms with some difficult truths, right? We rationalize it away, we get defensive, we get more staunch in our approach. We don't want to engage with difference. But I always say this, and Sid was the person, beautiful person that you know, recommended me for this panel. But what I tell students always is that you'll find that if you start to do the work, you start to read, you start to inform yourself, you start to correct yourself in front of people publicly and not taking it personally, you'll find that your connections will be representative of the type of person you are. And what I mean by that is that when you aren't truly someone that people can be in solidarity or trust with, you have very surface level connections. But when you can prove and consistently prove that you're about it, that you're interested in engaging authentically, that you're learning and you're vulnerable, that you're interested in this and beyond your own selfish community or your own people that have been impacted by it, then the connections and the authenticity reflects itself in the people you have around you and the way that people can engage with you, the types of conversations you have, and the significant kind of contributions you can make not only in your community and your families and in your greater institutions. And then the last piece I'll say is stay in your lane. You don't gotta be protesting, but there's a lot of tangible things that I do every single day in an office setting that changes the game. One of them is like what I just did right now. You have to read the room. Who's talking a lot? Who's not getting a chance to say? Who's saying stuff and isn't getting acknowledged for it? And then who's the other person that's getting all the love for what they already said? How do you call someone into that conversation? Instead of being that person, I have a lot of colleagues that do this. Junior, what you said in that meeting was so good. 20 minutes after the meeting, be that person that says, I co-sign on that. I've seen it. I've seen them do that to Junior. I've seen them do that to students. If you do that, then you're actually protesting, you're engaging, you're serving as an ally. I don't need you to tell me 20 minutes after. I know, I said it, I believe it. Do you, right? I think that that's the difference. And you have to be able to feel good and centered in that before you could ever tell me and come up to me and say, Junior, I'm one of the good ones. Because what tends to happen is, particularly what I see with young people, is that then they say, all these other white people, all these other non-LGBTQ folks, all these other cis hetero folks, all these other, they're just the worst. But me, you can trust me. I got you. And what's the old adage? If someone tells you they're funny, they're probably not funny. So you don't trust anybody that tells you that. And that's what I'll end it at.
Well, thank you so much, Junior. Jay, I'm just curious in terms of your reaction, your thoughts on the topic.
Well, first, let me just say I feel so fed by being here with everyone and hearing your experiences and your approaches to this work. So thank you, first and foremost. For me, kind of weaving it all together, everyone's lifted this up and talking about the different ways to connect into a movement. And the INE strategy, the INE Institute has a really good framework that I talk about for this. And it's called movement strategy, and there are different pieces. There is, let's see if I can remember all of them. There's mass protest and organizing. There's what's called inside game. There's personal transformation and alternative strategies. And essentially, mass protest is everything that we've talked about earlier. How do we make noise? How do we make something visible? How do we bring people into it and build this collective action? Inside game says, how do we take pre-existing structures and use them to our advantage? Things like voting, things like defund the police. Alternative strategy says, how do we imagine better? How do we imagine different? And that's things like abolish the police or co-ops or alternative medicine. And then lastly, my favorite as an educator is personal transformation. How am I transforming myself? How am I transforming the people around me to be better, to influence all these other spaces? Mm-hmm. And so, as everyone said, there are very specific ways and places to plug in and ways that make sense for you and ways to show up as an ally in those places. And the last thing I'll say is I work at a voting rights organization, and I find I come across a lot of organizers and folks who have been disenfranchised. And one thing that I struggle with is that I find we in my field negatively motivate people, right? It's always the world is burning, everyone is dying, you have to vote. That is true, but like voting can also create a better world. It can create a better place. And I think when this pandemic began and the racial uprisings began, I've always been the hope person and the bring it forward person. And I felt like this is not the time for that. And I was kind of lost. I felt unmoored because I didn't know where I now fit into how everything was going. But I had a friend who was just like, no, it's not weak to be hopeful. It's not silly, it's strong. And I came across this quote a couple of days ago from Brittany Packard. It says, I choose the discipline of hope over the ease of cynicism. And I'm now really leaning into the fact that it takes a lot more work to remain hopeful in dark times. It takes a lot more work to believe that our world can be better when we feel like we've been suffering under this burden for as long as we can remember. And so as important as it is to hold up and remember everything we've been through that has been negative, I also want us to imagine a world where we succeed, where our children are succeeding, where we can be together, because what are we fighting for? If we make this change, what is the change that we're trying to create? We have to be imagining better to have a goal to work towards. So that's kind of how I wanted to summarize my own personal perspective in all these pieces. And again, I'm so thankful to have been a part of this conversation and to speak with all of you and learn from all of you tonight.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jay. And I'm just looking at the time. And so as we wrap up, I wonder if everyone just your reflections on this evening, your reflections on the topic, on fellow panel colleagues, and then I'll wrap it up and say bye. So if we could start, Ellyn, maybe with you, that would be great.
Thank you, all of you, for participating in this tonight. It's really wonderful to meet you and to share the space with you. I've gotten so much out of the conversation. I also just real briefly just wanted to say, it's been a really hard week for people. And I really also want to appreciate you for coming to this space tonight. You know, obviously yesterday with the decision of the Breonna Taylor, I mean, it's hard to even like imagine what happened yesterday. Also, you know, the death of Justice Ginsburg was really harsh on many people as well. And so it's been a harsh week to take that on. And also, but that feels to me like the space, being an ally to recognize what other people are going through, and to know that, you know, this day might be harder for me, this day could be harder for you, but we are in this together, and we have to acknowledge those pains that come through seemingly on a daily basis right now. So thank you for sharing the space. I did just want to say in closing about SpeakOUT, because we're having our first online speaker training coming up October 24th and 25th. So it's the first time we're going to do this. And we're, you know, I'm very hopeful we're going to have a great training. Usually though, we have such a bonding experience during the training when it's a personal in-person experience. We're hoping to really make that still a very personal space for everybody. You can check us out at speakoutboston.org and find the information for the training. But it's even in this time of social distancing, we are going to try and make it a real connecting space for LGBTQ people and our allies.
Thank you, Ellyn. Thanks so much. What a great organization. Yves, if you want to have a wrap up for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, you know, one, just thank you for, you know, the invitation to be a part of this conversation, and thank you to, you know, my colleagues on the panel here. Look forward to working with you all beyond this space. When I think about, you know, just this time as well, I think the word that comes to mind is collective care. And knowing that this work it's hard, right? And so to the point earlier around us all being interconnected, our healing is interconnected as well. And so thinking about during this time when, because of COVID, when you know, we're isolated from each other, thinking about how do we create spaces for us to like this, to be connected and closer with each other. Because we know that is a huge protective factor. And so I think about, you know, when you leave this space, think about how are you creating spaces to stay connected? How are you creating spaces to make sure that you are cared for and others are cared for? And, you know, whether you're creating that space or finding the space, just make sure that you have a space and be open to bringing people into that space. So thank you all.
Thank you. Dr. Andre Bennett would.
Sure. Thank you again, Hope. Thank you to all of you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for just your wisdom and the energy that you brought here tonight. And I have to say, Jay, I think I did some justice to that quote that you mentioned. I choose the discipline of hope over the ease of cynicism. That's going to be my Facebook status in another few minutes from now. So thank you for sharing that. You know, I preached on Sunday at Zion Baptist Church, last Sunday at Zion Baptist Church, on the process of transformation through change, and they sound the same. Transformation and change sound the same. I preached on the process of transformation through change, and that came from a place of deep anger and sheer disappointment. I had gotten to a point, my son, my youngest son, my third child, just turned 18 years old. And I sat up the night before his birthday and I wrote him a 5-page letter, and ultimately the letter, telling him that I can no longer protect him from the world that I fought so hard and worked so hard over time to protect him from. When he was younger, I could dictate and determine who he hangs out with, where he goes, how he goes there. I can't do that now that he's an adult. I can't make those decisions. He makes those decisions. But ultimately, I gave him a 30-day ultimatum. Well, not ultimatum, but ultimatum. It's either we go back home or we move out of this state, and home meaning we go back to Jamaica. Because I feel like all the energy and the work that I've put in here in the name of nation building and in search and hope of a better life, I think I could do all of that back home and find the better life that I'm looking for. One where police are not pat on their backs for coming into my house and murdering me, or police are not given a free pass for kneeling in the neck of my child, or if my son chooses to live his life as a gay man or a transgender woman, or he or she's not, brutalized or murdered or beaten or taken advantage of, or, there are not laws in a country that dictates and determines that he or she does not get what is constitutionally and humanly due, morally due to them. I just got to a place of sheer anger and despondence, and I preached. The message was born. Transformation through change was born out of that place, and ultimately it walked through the purpose of change and the reasons for transformation and how you use the two to inform each other. And I say this, I'm not going to try and recap the sermon, but I say this to us and to all those who are viewing us. We all collectively have a responsibility to build, to create, to fight for, and to maintain a safer space, a safer place, and a better world than the one that we found and the one that we currently live in. It is no longer enough for us to sit behind the four walls of our home and look through our glass windows and shake our heads at the injustices that are happening, because none of us are protected, none of us are safe, none of us are free until all of us are free. We all have a collective responsibility to be our brothers, to be our sisters, and to be each other's keeper. And I pray, I urge that we get up, all of us, make a move, make a shift, take a stance, and start working toward a better place. That is my message to us tonight.
I thank you, Reverend. Thank you so much. Extremely inspirational and powerful to make the world a better place when you leave it than when you found it. Absolutely. To Junior, do you have any final closing thoughts?
I just have like a really short quote. And it's something that I use often. It's like what centers the work that I do. And I think it's something that I share whenever I possibly can. And so it's called A Message from the Universe by Yolo Akili. And your story can help save someone's life. Your silence contributes to someone else's struggle. Speak so we can all be free. Love so we can all be liberated. The moment is now. We need you. And that's it. We need you.
That's amazing. And Jay, I just wanted to make sure if you had any final comments. I know you would.
Those were my final comments. I mean, everybody said it better, so nothing to add. Vote, please. Do your census, vote. Those are my final comments.
Okay, great. I just want to say, these forums have been extremely inspirational for our community, for myself personally, certainly as the founder of North Shore Pride. I saw something that needed some intervention and gathered a community, just like Reverend Andre talked about, and laid a foundation. And it really is a community that builds North Shore Pride and has kept us going. And these forums have just been, the community responds in a way in which that people are looking for these answers, are looking for your wisdom, are looking for your guidance. And we are so grateful to each of you on this panel this evening. What a timely set of topics. And on behalf of North Shore Pride and the board of North Shore Pride, I am just so grateful to each and every one of you. I want to thank, as we could not do this without some sponsorship, and I just want to thank the Rainbow Times very much, and to Nicole, I thank you for making every attempt to stay on this forum. I want to thank Creative Collective. They're the foundation behind the logistics behind this forum, every forum, and thank Michelle, Joey Phoenix, who are the brainchilds of all of this. And to our interpreters, Kinsey, Gabriel, thank you so much. Thank you. And I just want to let people know our next forum will be October 22nd, always the fourth Thursday of the month. And October is National Health Literacy Month. And so our topic for our next forum will be, it's okay not to be okay, getting to a healthier place for our LGBTQ+ community. And so I hope that you join us. Again, to our panelists, I thank you so much. You're an inspiration, I know, to me and certainly to the rest of our community. I wish you well, stay well, be well. I wish you peace and love. Good night. Thank you.